which is for the local LGBT community, and are you aware of the issues faced by them? We'll go to Andrew.
Sorry, Marie. I think you said come to Andrew, but you broke up right at
Sorry,
the
I'll
last
say it
bit.
again. Do you support the local LGBT community, and are you aware of the issues faced by them?
Yes, a complete and unequivocal yes, I do support the local LGBTQ community. I have lots of friends and neighbours that are part of that community, but I would be the first to acknowledge that it is not my primary area of expertise. I think I have an empathy and understanding of the challenges they face, but I would be the first to acknowledge that there are other existing councillors, including those in Le Carbe, who have a better expertise. But that doesn't mean I won't listen and I won't engage and that I won't remain supportive of the issues that are important for them. One of the most disappointing things that previous council administrations did in the past was to allow the demise of what I thought was a really important committee, and it was called the Equalities and Communities Committee, established all the way back in 2012, and it only actually remained in place for about 2 years, and I was very fortunate to serve on that. And that committee dealt with a whole range of equalities issues, not just those affecting the particular LGBTQ community, but lots of other equality issues across the Highlands. And it enabled the council to focus on those particular issues. And since that disappeared from the council, I don't feel any of the other committees have really had that sort of level of scrutiny and that level of opportunity to engage in those issues. So it would certainly be a good thing, I think, for Le Carbe councillors to lobby for greater scrutiny of the various policies that the council has at a central level that affects people within these communities. So things like a lack of mental health and well-being support, those within the community, a lack of focus on the impact of bullying and harassment, particularly within our educational settings. One of the reports that came frequently to that committee that I mentioned was exactly that, a report on incidents of bullying and hate incidents within our schools and how we as a council would tackle that. And I know other councillors in Le Carbe are supporting local events, including a Pride event next year, and I would certainly do my part to support those events. But the bottom line is, although I support all of that, any councillor represents everyone within the Fort William and Ardnamurchan ward, whether they're within the LGBT community, whether they're old, whether they're young, whether they live in a rural area, and whether they live in Fort William. So I actually want equality for everyone right across the ward. I want equality of access to services, things like mental health and wellbeing support. I want equality in all the services that the council can provide. And that's my bottom line.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Susan.
I'm afraid we're all going to more or less agree on this, you know. I absolutely support everybody having the right to express themselves freely as far as gender and sexual relations are concerned, and to have respect from other people. But I have to say I am concerned about the gender bill that's gone through the Scottish Parliament in the last few years. And I'm very concerned about people approving surgery and chemical intervention in growing young people, and I'm not. I wouldn't be opposed to it completely. I would definitely be in favour of people waiting until they're certainly adult, and you could have a big discussion about when that is. And I'm alarmed about some of the trends that have taken place in the last few years, and so it's a complicated feeling about that whole issue. But in general, the right of people to choose how they want to behave and to be treated with respect, I'm completely in support of.
Thank you, Susan. Nathan.
I'll if I unmute myself. Yep, to echo both the complete folk before me. Yes, obviously, total support. One of the core values of libertarianism is that individuals should have the complete right to freedom of speech, freedom of choice, and freedom of action in their lives. A government shouldn't have the ability to tell you what you can and cannot do. The only time they should is if you are harming others with your choices. So in this case, that's something we don't have to worry about here. So yeah, 100% support for anybody in any community that is simply wanting to live their life and be themselves and express themselves as the individual they are. 100% support. You know, any regulation on personal choices is something that we would strongly oppose as a party in general. As for the issues faced and sort of understanding them, I profess I'm not an expert on this. I do have friends who are in this community. I know that here in the Highlands, one of the big issues we have is that it's a very much smaller community than it is in other places. So there's less of a support network with people who are either also part of that community, be they LGBT themselves, or allies as they're obviously known, or people who are accepting and inclusive. So much as Andrew said himself, there's a need for some extra support and maybe some mental health, there needs to be a consideration, because there is less of a support network almost for these, for folk in these communities. It's a much smaller and more isolated community, because obviously we're far more spread out here. And obviously there is always in every situation, there's always risks of, losing people you thought were friends and family, with being honest with yourself. And so I think that support network is very important. So it is something we need to bear in mind in this area, is that it is much smaller and not as well sort of put together. It's more spread out. So that's something we need to be aware of when we're thinking of how we're going to go forth policy-wise, I think. But to break it down to the basic level, full support for anyone who wishes to just be themselves and live their life and be happy. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Nathan. Rebecca.
It's great to see that we all do agree. That's fantastic. In the last few days, we've seen minority groups across the world rocked on their heels and feel genuine shock and horror at the lack of protection and solidarity from some groups and societies. And it's, I think, frightening to think that that process can be included in perhaps in areas in our country too, within allegations of certain MPs refusing to meet with or represent members of the LGBT community. And I strongly believe we cannot allow for the importation of such intolerance or bigotry. And I agree with Andrew that every elected representative at every level of government has a responsibility to represent every constituent and to defend their rights to a hilt. I've been a supporter and an ally of many groups marginalised by the mainstream, including the LGBT community. And as a head teacher, I piloted Cannot Leave in High School to awards from Stonewall, for instance. We took part in a rock challenge, and it was Snow White and Princess Charming, which actually won a lot of awards and based on the work done on inclusion within the school. And it was taken into Highland Council. It was maybe a different thing from what Andrew was talking about, but we had an education group that was looking at equality and inclusion and working with schools across Highland on and some of the stuff that we did done in Cannot Leave in High School was actually piloted across Highland. So I think that was it was nice to have the young people's views and included that into those policies across not just Loch Arbor but Highland too. So as Andrew mentioned, there is a group working on a Pride event in Loch Arbor, and I'm really very fortunate that I've been invited and included in their meetings recently. Yeah, so that's great. Thank you.